Hello, my name is Billy Mitchell, and today I would like to talk to y'all about something that is very important in my life. This is the story about a little boy who, growing up in his early years, had a very unique experience. A woman named Sharon Carey would take him to a home and a family and leave him there for months on end, and then come back, and he would take all of his possessions and he would go with her again to another family. Later, he would find out that this woman was a social worker for an adoption agency, and that the families he was going to were foster families. Eventually, he was placed with a family, Ted and Mary Mitchell, who had 2 children of their own, Ted Jr. and Janine. And he would live with them from the age of 2 until the age of 4, when he was finally adopted by this family. As you've probably guessed, that little boy was me. So I had plenty of memories from before I came to live with the Mitchells. So I always knew that I was adopted. They never hid it from me. They never made it a big deal other than to say that they were my parents and that I should not ever feel like I wasn't part of the family. So I grew up with a very loving home, very loving parents, a brother and a sister that didn't ever treat me as anything other than their brother. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Now, as I got older, questions would creep into my mind about my birth family. Who were they? What was my heritage, my ancestry, and why I was given up for adoption? It wasn't until I was in high school that I started to take these thoughts seriously. At one point, I contacted the adoption agency, the Pelton Faith Home in Houston, Texas, and they sent me my medical background, but since it was a closed adoption, they could not send me anything else. So from that, I knew my heritage was English, Irish, Scottish, and they told me Cherokee Indian. So I would look online and post in various adoption groups my story, hoping that someone would know where I came from. Years went by. I joined the military. I served for 2 years, 9 months, and 20 days. I got out. I married myself to a woman while I was in the Army. We had 3 sons, Joshua, Jordan, twins, and Zachary. But that marriage failed, and I was unable to see my sons after that because of my situation with my ex-wife. It just was not ideal, and there was bad blood between us, and she took it out on me by not letting me see my children. Although I have to say she was always a good mother, so I didn't begrudge her that. I thought it best to let her have her way, basically. And it's something that I will regret to my grave, because she poisoned my sons against me, and they won't have anything to do with me, even though we've reconnected, or tried to reconnect, once they were of legal age. But no, there were still threats of withholding college money if they didn't break ties with me. So they broke ties. I mean, I don't know, in the future they may contact me again. I don't know. I'm not exactly hiding. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all kinds of social platforms. They know I'm there. But anyway, years later, I met my current wife, and I went to the Terrell the Terrell Genealogical Library in Beaumont, Texas, and looked through their microfiche films of the Texas State Birth Index, because my adopted mother had thought my name at birth was either Hill or Wells. So I searched on my birth date and my birth year under those names. I knew my first name and middle name hadn't changed. So I looked up Billy Wayne Hill, and I didn't find anything. But when I looked up Billy Wayne Wells, I found an entry that was in my county at the time I was born, and it even had the same birth number listed as the one on my birth certificate. So I knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that my last name at birth was Wells. I updated my posts through the adoption registries and kept my emails and everything current, but nobody ever contacted me. I couldn't find anything concrete under that name on the internet. So jumping back to about a year and a half ago, my wife convinced me to take an ancestry DNA test. My stepdaughter's grandmother had bought them both DNA kits, and they didn't really want to do them at the time. One did and ended up doing it, but the second one went to me, and my wife bought her one, and we both took the ancestry DNA test. So about 4 weeks later, the results came in, and I had several matches, and it scared me. I won't lie. I mean, I've always wanted to know what my ancestry is. You know, who I'm related to, what my nationality or heritage is, the cultures that I'm from. But I was scared to contact these people for fear of rejection. That's the only thing I can think of. So my wife emailed the closest match I had. It was just a woman named Kelly Love. And Kelly said that she'd been looking for me for years. She knew my name, but for some reason she never came across any of my adoption registry posts. Or if she did, it was at a time where it was an outdated email. I don't know. But I called and talked to her, and she started telling me about our birth mother, MOZELL Wells, who had passed away in 2011, and about another half-sister, Catherine Jordan, who she had already found. Which, I mean, found is a misnomer, because they had actually been friends in high school. And they just didn't know that they were sisters. But Catherine knew she was adopted. She found out she was adopted. Her mother never told her anything. But people at her church did know things, because Catherine's adopted mother, turns out, was one of the registered nurses present during her birth. So she always knew who Catherine's birth mother was, but would not tell her. But a woman at church told her who her birth mother was when she was like 17 or 18 years old. And Catherine was like, I know you know something, and you're gonna tell me. And the woman told her she found MOZELL, and they visited several times together. But MOZELL was wanting a mother-daughter relationship with her, and Catherine was not comfortable with that, because her adopted mother, was the only mother that she had known, and she was not looking to replace her. She was just looking to know her birth mother, to be friends, basically. So eventually she had passed away in 2011, so me and Kelly will never have been able to meet her. So a couple of weeks later, me, Kelly, and Catherine got together in Baytown, which was where we're all from. And we met at a Cracker Barrel and had lunch together, and had a wonderful time. And we took pictures, and we keep in contact regularly on Facebook and text message. I mean, we're family now. I mean, no doubt about it. We're family, and we're going to be family for the rest of our lives. But the story doesn't end there. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from another woman who was also a match, a second cousin match, on my Ancestry DNA match list. And her name was Jennifer Young. And I had already updated my family tree on Ancestry with my mother's side of the family, and traced it back as far as I could go. I'm still tracing it back. But she asked me how could we be so closely related when she didn't know anybody on my family tree. So I explained the situation to her, that this was my mother's side of the family. I was adopted, but I didn't know who my birth father was. And at the time we were speaking, we ended up calling each other, and she was on her way up in Oklahoma for chemo treatment. She had cancer, and she was with her mother. And she, you know, after me saying that I didn't know who my birth father was, she said, "Well, you look just like my Uncle Richard." And she took one of my photos on Facebook and stitched it together with a photo of her uncle and sent it to me. And I'll include that photo in this video. But we looked identical, except he was older than me. I mean, from the goatee and mustache to a baseball hat and glasses, we looked identical. So she put me in touch with his oldest daughter, Jody, and we convinced her to get an ancestry DNA test. Because at the time, one of the other matches was Barbara Young, who was Richard's sister, my aunt. But there had been another brother, Ray, who had died back in 1977 in a car accident. Well, Jenny's mother confirmed that Richard and Ray, his brother who died, and Moselle and her brother Odell were friends when they were teenagers and hung out together all the time. They lived 2 streets apart from each other, and at one point, after Moselle's parents had passed away, she went to live with the Youngs for about a year or 2. I can't remember exactly how long. So at the time I was conceived, she would have been about 18 or 19 years old. Richard would have been about the same age. And Ray would have been 14. But it's not that big of an age difference. And people start being sexually active at young ages sometimes. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. Sorry, there's a fly on the screen. That Ray could have been my birth father. It would have been kind of weird, but it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. So, by Jody getting the DNA test, if she came back as a close family member like Kelly and Catherine did, she would have been my half-sister. But if she would have come back as a cousin, that would have meant that Ray was my father and not Richard. So she took the test, and a couple of weeks later, I got an updated match list. And lo and behold, there's Jody as a close family member. She was my half-sister, which meant Richard was my father. So a couple of weeks later, we all got together at a restaurant in Cleveland, Texas. Me and my wife and one of my stepdaughters, met with Richard, and who was still alive, Jody, my aunt that was a match, Aunt Barbara, who they call Aunt Jody for some reason, and another sister of mine, Angel, and her daughter, and a couple of other people. Yeah, I'm kind of still foggy about who some of the other people were. I just know they're relations. So Richard, it was another funny point. They had already ordered their food by the time we got there, and so I ordered, and when they delivered the food, me and Richard had ordered the exact same thing. It was quite kind of surreal, and he had a lot of the same hobbies and interests that I do. We had the same demeanor. And we were both passionate about the things that we liked. But anyway, he was saying that, he remembered Moselle and Odell and hanging out and everything, but he never remembered being with her in a sexual way. But, I mean, he was the first to admit, DNA doesn't lie, and welcome to the family. And he was overjoyed to have another child that he never knew about. Because with my mother's side of the family, there were 4 of us. There was Kelly, Catherine, me, and there's another sister, Barbara, who we have not found yet. But on my father's side of the family, there was Jody, Angel, Misty, Christopher, and Ray. So 5 siblings on my father's side of the family, and 3 more siblings on my mother's side of the family. So I had 8 new brothers and sisters. So, and they all accepted me into the family. And I ended up being the oldest one. And I have a feeling that I know why Richard never knew about me. He was married at the time of my conception. Him and his wife had just lost a baby. The baby was stillborn. And so they were devastated. This would have been their first child. And so I was born in October, so that would have put my conception date between December of 1969 and January of 1970. Well, I think they lost the baby that November. And Richard had joined the Air Force and was leaving. He left for basic training in February. So, there was a lot of alcohol involved back then, maybe some drugs. I don't know. We haven't really talked too clearly about that time of his life. It may be questions for the future on what his life was like in that 2-month period during my conception. Now, I believe Moselle was also married at the time to a man whose last name was Sidlicki. It's a Polish name. But they were only married for 8 months. So what I think happened is she was married. She had an affair or a night with Richard that he doesn't remember, either because of drugs or alcohol or whatnot. Because he was in mourning, he was getting ready to leave to go to the Air Force. It was a stressful time. So he may have been drowning his sorrows. I don't know. We may never know. But as close as they were, Moselle would have known he was married. So she may have never told him about the pregnancy. I believe that she did probably tell her husband, which is why they got divorced before I was born. But that's just guesses on my part from what I have found on the internet and Ancestry.com and the records. Sorry. Hold on. Okay, so, and I've since been able to trace back the Wells side, the Wells and the Young side of the family. On my mother's side, I'm related to Robert the Bruce, who is King of Scotland, through his daughter, Princess Marjorie. On another line in that family tree, I'm related to Queen Anne and King Philip, I think, who, if you trace his ancestry back, I would be related to King Edward the Longshanks, who was the King of England during the time of the Scottish War of Independence, who, as you know from Braveheart, the historical story of William Wallace, Robert the Bruce was King of Scotland during the Scottish War of Independence against Edward the Longshanks. So I'm related to both principal parties of the Scottish War of Independence on my mother's side of the family. On my father's side of the family, my great-grandmother, her name was Selena Corbeo. And if you follow her lineage back several generations, I'm related to Don Juan Corbeo, who was head of one of the 7 families who founded San Antonio on orders of the King of Spain, and they came from the Canary Islands. So there's a huge plaque on the San Antonio Riverwalk because it was built on Corbeo Ranch. The 7 families have a museum. They call them the Canary Islanders in San Antonio, and there's a whole association dedicated to the historical preservation of those 7 families. I have yet to visit it. I really want to. And there are other interesting stories that I have to detail on either side of the family. I traced one line back in Scotland so far back that the names of the people had Viking names. So my family had been in Scotland since the Viking invasion. But 53% of my ancestry is English. Well, it's English and Northwestern European, which would be France, Brittany, Spain. And then I have Welsh ancestry, Irish and Scottish ancestry, a little bit from Sweden, a little bit from the Baltics, but that's it. No Native American, which surprised me because I've always had a strong connection to the Native American people here, the Native American spirituality in particular. But anyway, that is my story, and I wanted to pass this on to other adoptees who are looking for their birth families. I have to tell you, these DNA tests, the Ancestry.com, the 23andMe, and others like it, are well worth it. If you're up for the challenge of trying to find your birth family, if you're wanting to try to reconnect with them, even with the possibility of rejection, if you're wanting to find out what your lineage is, what your ancestry is, who you were related to in history, I highly recommend getting these tests done and finding out. It's as easy as spitting in a tube and putting it in the mail. So I just wanted to pass this story along to you guys and hope that you can take away something from this that's positive. I would not trade my experience for anything. I have a birth father who accepts me for who I am and wants to know me. And I have 8 new brothers and sisters who all want to get to know me and want me to be part of their family. And my adopted family, who is so happy that I know now. And it hasn't diminished my relationship with them in the least. The relationship I have with my birth family is totally separate. And it doesn't mean that I love my birth mother or my adopted mother and my adopted father any less. It doesn't change our history together. It doesn't change our memories of each other, of the way we interact with each other. Nothing has changed with them. But I have this whole new family that I get to explore and come to know. I have new nephews and nieces. I have aunts and uncles and a new heritage to explore. It's been life-changing, but for me it's been a positive change. And I hope that more people can experience what I'm experiencing, which is why I decided to share my story in full to anybody who will listen, for anybody who needs this information. It's there. The tools are yours for the taking. Begin your own journeys, and good luck. Thank you for listening, and stay safe. I thank you for your time. Bye.